What's up? So I've got another question for you, and this is a long question and I will have a long answer, but it's a good one. It has to do with sales, hiring salespeople. So if you're wishing that I'd create 2 or 3 minute videos, I'm just not your guy. I just cannot pull it off. So who knows how long this will be, but a lot of good information here. So an individual I know, Jimmy, he's been a Service Autopilot member since almost the beginning. He's asking a question about hiring a salesperson. So he basically sent me a text message and said, hey, can you record a Lawn Care Millionaire video on hiring a salesperson? And I texted back like, hey, can you email me a little bit more information? And the reason I say that is, here's some things I wanted to know. It's like, okay, are we doing residential, commercial? What's an average client value on an annual basis? Are you contract, no contract? I needed to know some more details so that I could try to give a quality answer. And so Jimmy got me some details. I want to read you the details real quick, and then I'm going to have to look at my sheet. I made a bunch of notes so I can try to do a quality job answering this question, because this is one I've been asked a lot. So here's some notes that came back from Jimmy. He said, hey, we're mostly residential. We're doing programs. Like for example, a $90 program is just fertilization, 7 visits. He said 90 programs, so I thought he might mean $90. I'm not sure. I'm going to go with $90, and he doesn't do contracts. He says here a little bit later, we don't offer contracts, but we do agreements. And all of our services are divided into 12 equal payments billed on auto charge, meaning that he adds up all the money that the client's going to spend for the year, he divides it by 12, and he can equalize their payments, like installment payments. And so the average sale, in terms of I asked him about the dollar value of a sale. He said the average dollar value of the sale will vary. It could be as little as $570 for the whole year, or over $600 per month. And so I think I'm going to read these numbers again. I think he is referring to dollars, but he said it's just as an example for an idea. So as an example, their $90 program, and I'm assuming it's 12 months of the year, is the 7 fertilization visits. 108, and he might be serving bigger properties, so I don't know if they're big or small residential. $180 program is fertilizer and mowing. The $270 program is fertilizer, mowing, mulch, monthly pruning. $360 program is fertilizer, mowing, mulch, spring and summer, pruning, whatever is needed, and leaf removal. All right, don't get caught up on those numbers. Don't copy those numbers. They should mean nothing to you. He was just giving an example, and we're assuming I've interpreted this correctly, but it doesn't hinder me from answering his question. So in regards to hiring a salesperson, I'm going to talk through some money, I'm going to talk through where to look for them, I'm going to talk through a whole bunch of stuff. When you get them, what do you do with them so that you are successful? There's no easy answer to finding salespeople, and when it comes to salespeople, it's not usually going to be the case that the first one you get is going to work out. It is difficult, it's challenging, it's usually not the first step for most of us in building our businesses because it's hard. I think marketing is easier than building a sales team, personally. So the places that I would be looking for a salesperson: a recruiter. It works. I use them. It works. But it can cost you 10 to 25% of their salary. So if you hire a sales guy with a compensation of 50 grand, you could be paying out $5,000 to $12,500 to get that individual. So not only do you have to pay them the 50, that first year you got to cut the recruiter a check for the numbers I just gave you. Craigslist, it works. You just got to be consistent. It's $25 per ad. You keep showing up. Ads expire every 3 weeks. You just keep doing it all the time. You try different language. You try ads in different categories. It works. Indeed.com works. A fella that I know in Georgia, his wife is a recruiter. She, I believe, is the one that originally gave me the advice for Indeed.com. We've used Indeed to hire. I know a bunch of other people have used Indeed to hire. Indeed works, but you got to be aggressive. I believe she's super aggressive. Like, she's totally got the skills to go out and recruit people. It's very obvious when you meet her, and I believe she's a little more proactive than just I know for a fact. She doesn't just place a ad. She's like calling people. Like on Indeed, you can look at resumes and then you can call people. So she's aggressive, but she brings in employees. LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, you can go look. You might want to spend again, this is not going to be a short video. You'll probably want to spend the $25 to $50 per month so that you can actually view additional details in LinkedIn. You can email people, you can reach out to them. So basically, you're scouring LinkedIn looking for the kind of person you want, and then you're going to get them. Very similar to what I just said on Indeed. So yeah, this is all a bunch of work, and it's, most people won't do it, but if you want to get the people, these are strategies that I know work. And then you're going to your vendors, your guys you're buying chemical from, the guys you're buying equipment from, the guys you're buying irrigation parts from, the guys you're buying stone from, blah, blah, blah. You're going to all those people and you're like, hey, do you know anyone? And you're paying them cash, you're doing whatever you got to do, you're networking, you're finding these people. They're out there, but you got to find them, and you got to do some work to find them. And then once you find them and get them, you got to onboard them in your company. You got to do everything you can to make them successful. Because it just doesn't always work out. And just because you like them or they're friendly or they seem like they're going to be problem-free and not stress your life out, that does no indicator that a salesperson will be a good fit inside your company. You could run ads for someone like a spray tech or an irrigator. So for example, let's say that you want somebody to go out and sell irrigation and fertilization, weed control, mowing, and project work and all these other things. There's probably some guys out there that have not officially been in sales, so it's as if you have a smaller budget, but they got the potential, they got the ability if you'll work with them and coach them and give them some things to read and spend some money on getting them trained. But they've got the industry knowledge, they know how to do the thing, they've been a spray tech, they've been an irrigator, they've been something. And so you can run ads, but they're not looking for a sales position, but they'd be open to it if they thought they could really make a lot more money. So you run ads for spray techs, irrigators, but when they read the ad, you kind of bait them in a sense, like, hey, here's a job, a spray tech job, but when they read the ad, they realize it's really a job doing what they already know, but they could make 2x what they're making now if they consider sales. And then you sell your company and you sell them on why they want to do that. So it's sort of a way to weasel in there, get their attention, and then try to bring them over and turn them into a salesperson. Now some compensation, like I said, I got a bunch of notes here. So some compensation ideas. And where this is coming from is some of my experience from the past, but I'm more of a marketing guy. Like, I think marketing is going to lead, it is now and it's going to lead the future. I think marketing is more important than sales in many ways. And that's all. There's a lot of reasons why I feel that way. They really go together, so you can't separate one from the other. But I think more and more marketing teams are going to lead companies, and so I find marketing to be easier, and I find it easier to use marketing to bring in qualified leads that have already been, in many ways, already pre-sold, where the salesperson needs less ability, less experience to make that sell, because the marketing did most of the heavy lifting. So that tends to be my strategy in the businesses I have and have been part of. And so I have advice on building sales teams, a little bit from my experience, but a lot from getting to know other people through Service Autopilot, through Academy, the coaching program we have, through other business groups I'm involved in. So some of what I'm going to say is not all firsthand experience, but it's coming from smart people. If I'm not the one doing it, it's coming from smart people that know what they're doing. So I tend to see 3 types of compensation for this salesperson. One is base plus commission. So that might be a scenario where we're giving this individual a base salary of $28,000 to $36,000 a year. You need to do your own research, but take the concepts of what I'm talking about, take the ideas, maybe new things you've not heard before, and then go do some research. You'll be able to ask smarter questions. So don't get completely stuck and say, well, Jonathan said 28,000 should be the base. Well, I don't know. We're all in different markets, and I don't know exactly the problem you're trying to sell and what kind of salesperson you need, or the problem you're trying to solve, and the services you're trying to sell. So let's just go with my scenario here, 28 to 36K as a base, and then some form of a percentage of commission. I'm going to go into more detail here in a moment. Maybe it's a 5 to 10% commission. So my example here is you hire somebody and they're getting a base of $2,500 per month. That's their base salary. The only way they make more money is by selling, and then for every dollar that they sell of gross revenue, you're paying them a 5 to 10% commission. This is where we can get into really big conversations. Okay, well, is that smart? Should you pay on gross revenue, or should you pay on gross margin? Or should you pay on profitability? I would tend to say you should probably pay on gross margin. Challenge that idea. Ask other people. The dilemma is when you're just paying on gross, gross sales, gross revenue, there's no way to hold the individual accountable to pricing it right. When you're paying on profit, that really gets like, I mean, are we having a good year, a bad year? Are we investing in the company? There's so many factors when you get into paying off net profit on a job. So I tend to think gross margin is the way you pay. So my examples, though, are going to be off gross revenue. The rest of my examples are off gross revenue, not gross margin, because they'll give you ideas and then you can go research from here. I see a lot of people pay us off gross revenue, total money earned for the job, for the maintenance contract, for the project. That's the examples I'm using. I see a lot of people doing that, but I think their wisdom is in probably paying off gross margin. So back to my example, paying somebody $2,500 a month as a base, then we're paying them a 5 to 10% commission. That's one scenario I see a lot. A second scenario I see is we're paying straight commission. I see this less often. And so basically the only way you make money is selling, and you get a percentage. So maybe I pay you 10 or 12% of the total revenue that you bring in for the year. So if you sell $1 million in work for me, I'm going to pay you 100 grand or 120,000 for the year, but you get no base. A lot of individuals can't make the move with no base. So then you'll see a lot of companies doing like a draw. So I'll give you a $2,500 base, and then we're going to draw against it. So basically, if you go out and sell until you've sold whatever amount of, like let's say your commission's 10%. So you'd have to sell 25,000 in work this month if your commission's 10% to make up for the $2,500 base I just paid you. So until you sell more than 25,000 in revenue this month, I won't be paying you any money. Once you sell 26,000, I'll pay you 10% of that $1,000 because the 25,000 you sold this month just covered your base. And now in the early months of bringing this person on the team, they're going to be upside down. And so you figure out how you want to handle that. Do they have to earn that back, basically pay back the base as they go through the year, and then they earn everything above their base? Hopefully you get the idea. That's another scenario I see, but you see it a little less often. If you're going to get somebody into that position, they're generally either desperate for a job, it's like, I'm not making any money now, I might as well try this, or they're very seasoned, coming with a contact list, extremely confident and know what they can do, and they like that model because they can earn potentially more money under that model. And then the third one I see is just straight salary. So the idea is, okay, I believe in you, I think you've got potential, you have to prove yourself or you're not staying on the payroll, and I need you to prove yourself in 90 days or 120 days or whatever that number is, but I'm just going to pay you $75,000 a year. I'm paying you a flat salary. And then at the end of the year, we're going to look back and see how did you do for last year, and if you knocked it out of the park, I'm adjusting your salary up, and then you'll make that for the next year. So it's very simple. We see that one as well, just basically straight salary, and it's based on prior performance. Okay, so so I gave examples of selling new revenue. Let me give you some examples I also see. So if you're doing contract work, meaning in that first year, maybe they sell the contract, and let me use an example of they're making a 7.5% commission, okay? So let's say, because I'm going to give you an example in a moment that uses that number, but let's say that I go out, I get a base salary, whatever that amount is, let's just call it $3,000 a month, and then I get 7.5% of all gross revenue sold, all right? So that means whatever the value of a contract is that I sell in year one of that relationship with the new client, I'm going to get 7.5% of that contract, okay? So if I sell a $100,000 contract, I get $7,500. I usually get it as the company gets paid. I don't get it all up front. All those points are negotiable. Companies do things all kinds of different ways, but what I normally see is the salesman gets paid when the company gets paid. And he gets 7.5% of the contract value. Now, in year two, he might or she might get a few points to renew that contract. So in year one, sold a $100,000 contract, got a $7,500 commission. In year two, on that $100,000 contract, I might get a $2,000 or $3,000 commission. I get some smaller percentage for renewals, and maybe it's 1, 2, 3%. I don't know what a lot of companies do in this area, but I know it's usually a smaller amount for annual renewals because the salesperson needs to go resell that work. That's not uncommon. They also might get some percentage of an upsell. So in year one, I sold a contract Use my $100,000 example, I got $7,500 for it, but then there were some change orders, there were some upsells, and I might get 7.5% on that, or I might get 5% for upsells. Again, lots of scenarios. In year 2, you've got to figure all this out, but you want to figure these things out and you want to nail them down before you start looking for somebody. In year 2, I might get paid 3% for renewals. Okay, and hopefully that made sense. But I might also get a bump, like a 5% commission on anything I sell over and above whatever they bought last year. So I get 2.5% or 3% for just renewing last year's agreement at the same level, and then any additional thing I can upsell them or cross-sell them or whatever you want to call it, add-ons, I might get 5% commission on that. These are examples, but they're things you want to think through and put numbers to. So I'll give you two more points here. I'm going to give you an example of a commission, and then I'm going to give you some ideas on how to make this salesperson successful if you hire them. So when you're figuring out the compensation, one of the things you want to do is you want to think about, what am I comfortable with? Like, how much am I willing? You want to look and say, okay, what is the benchmark in the industry? What are other companies paying? But also, what are you willing to pay? What are you comfortable with? Knowing your pricing, knowing your profit margins, knowing your current expense to acquire new clients. How much can you afford when it comes to hiring a salesperson? One other thing just came to mind. Some companies will pay 5% as an example if they give you the lead. So they do the marketing, they have a marketing expense, they give you, the salesperson, the lead to close, they might pay only 5%. Whereas if you source your own lead, meaning my marketing dollars did not bring the lead in that you're a salesperson closing, if you went out and got your own lead, knocking on doors, going to networking groups, whatever it was, then I might pay you a higher commission, such as 10%. That's another way of thinking. If I give you the lead, it might pay 1%. If you bring in the lead, it might pay a different percent. So now an example. I was saying that you have to figure out what you're comfortable paying, what you can afford to pay. So a way to think about this is, let's say I'd be willing to pay, this was a quick example, don't get stuck on this. I always want to make the point, please don't get stuck on my example numbers. They might give you a guide, but they are not exact. Maybe I'm willing to pay $75,000 a year to a salesperson to bring me $600,000 in recurring revenue. So in my example here, I'm not talking about project work, I'm talking about a contract that I think there's high probability that it will renew in year 2 and 3 and such. Okay? Or it doesn't even have to be contract work. I've said that because a lot of companies do contracts. It could just be a bucket of work that's worth X amount of money to me, and I know that because of quality and customer service, we're going to keep the clients, they're going to keep buying all the same stuff year after year. That's sort of how my company works. So I'm, in my hypothetical example, totally comfortable and willing to pay a salesperson $75,000 if they can bring me $600,000 in annual recurring maintenance work. Okay? So now if I was going to back into that, let's say I'm like, okay, to go get somebody that's probably got a family, that has got some ability, they're probably going to need a $3,500 a month base so they can just sort of cover their bills while they get up to speed with my company. So if I at a $35,000 base, gave you the wrong example. I was looking at my notes. If my average client is worth $3,500 a year, so there's a little math here. I hope this all makes sense. So I have decided I'll pay $75,000 for $600,000 in revenue. My clients on average are worth $3,500 a year to me. I was just guessing based on Jimmy's numbers that he gave me. Maybe his average client's about $3,500 a year. If I divided $600,000 by a client value of $3,500 per year, I need my salesperson to sell 171 new accounts for me. So now I say to myself, okay, I'm comfortable with 600 grand, but to get the 600 grand, they're gonna have to sell 171 accounts. Is that realistic? Can I bring in enough leads for them to work? Can they source enough of their own leads? Do they have experience to source their own leads? Is 171 realistic? Because what you don't want to happen is like, hey, this all sounds great, but reality is there's no way in the world they could sell more than 70 accounts. Well, then they're going to starve. They're not going to make enough money. You're going to invest in them for 9 months. They're just going to quit, and you're going to start over. And it's like 9 months of wasted time. So you're trying to find the happy balance of them making good money where they're highly motivated, and they're motivated year after year to go harder, 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 sell more and more. But you're not overpaying them too much so they stay hungry, and you're not underpaying them where they leave you. And all the time and training and everything is wasted. So you're trying to find that spot. So with my math here, you just arrived at, okay, I need them to sell 171 accounts a year. Does that pass your gut check? Does that seem possible? Okay, I want to think about that. Let's say that you say, yep, I think 171 is really doable. I can bring enough leads, they can go get their own. I think that's doable. So if we pay them a $30,000 base, okay, that means that they need to earn 45. If they're going to hit the $600,000 number, then they will earn 45,000 in commission on that 600,000. Okay, and so if to do that, I would be paying them a 7.5% commission. And as I'm talking this through, I can see some flaws in this. Like, I'm not even going to go down that road because I can add 20 minutes to this video. But the point is, and you'll see this kind of a model is used by a lot of companies. So I'm not making this up. This is real. It's just that my numbers may not be perfect. But in my example, I'm going to pay them a $30,000 base. If they're going to bring in 171 accounts worth $600,000 to me, and I want them to make $75,000 a year, then I'm going to pay them a 7.5% commission on every gross revenue dollar they bring into my company, and then it'll work out perfectly. For 600 grand in revenue, they'll make 75 grand. For all the additional revenue they sell, they'll make more than 75,000. If they sell less, they'll make less than 75,000. That's the idea, and that's how you want to think about this. So you want to first sit down and say, what's possible? Like, what am I willing to pay for this amount of revenue? And then you want to back into the numbers in the way that I just did. Now, the last point, I didn't feel like this video would be complete unless I went one step further and I talked briefly about how you make this person successful. And really, that's a very long conversation. But if you go find this salesperson, you've got all your numbers right, you got the commission just right, and you go out and you find a salesperson and they let you down, they don't work out, it's highly probable that in spite of everything you might do to help this person, your first or second salesperson won't work out. You'll hear that over and over. Companies have to churn through the salespeople until they find the winners, like the ones that just knock it out of the park. And that's one of the frustrating things about building a sales team. But if you hire a salesperson, you're like, you're nice, I think you're good, you have potential, go forth and make me rich. If that's your approach, you're probably not going to experience what you're hoping to experience. And so I would suggest that what you do is you sit down and you say, okay, I want you to make at least 75,000 this year. That means you need to sell 600,000 in revenue. How do you sell 600,000 in revenue? Well, the way you sell 600,000 in revenue is you need to do these things daily. You need to be calling, you need to be sending this many emails. You need to be calling this many existing clients in our database that we did work for in the past. You need to be networking out at groups, out at landscape nurseries, out at all these other places, this many per day, this many. So that's really how you think about it. Let me back up a second. You're doing this many emails, you're doing this many calls, you're doing this much networking, you're doing or attending this many networking meetings, getting this many business cards, whatever your metric is. You're going to this many in-person estimates or appointments, giving this many estimates. You're doing this many proactive inspections of our clients' properties so you can do upsells. There's all these actions, activities that when performed lead to an outcome, and the outcome is generating revenue. And so the idea is that you sit down with this person, you say, here's the goal. I want you to make 75,000 and I want you to make 150 because you win, I win. And so here's how you win. You do this many things daily, this many things weekly, this many things monthly, this many things quarterly, and you create a plan and you show this individual how to back into getting to the revenue number, which means an income number that they want. So don't just do everything I described and then hire this person and hope it all works out. Go the next step, make the plan, sit down, talk through it, and then the next step is get them training. Sure, they've got experience as a salesperson, but give them more training. Give them, you want to do everything you can to help them be wildly successful. And one more thought, if this individual is a stud at selling, like they are knocking out of the park, but you're like, my gosh, they suck at writing estimates. My goodness, they're terrible about doing this or that. Get them an assistant. Keep them crazy busy doing what they're absolutely best at. Sell, 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 and get them an assistant to write their estimates. Get them an assistant to do callbacks. Get them an assistant to do whatever it is they got to do that you can't stand about them, but at the end of the day, they're making you tons of money. And let them go do the thing they're great at and fill in with other people in the areas where they're weak. But by all means, help them go faster, faster, faster. Long video, I hope it helped.